The injunction to Cain is from God to Cain. Cain, the real problem is right outside the door. Be careful at the handle. It's not eating you up from the inside, Cain. It's attacking you from out there. You are Cain, son of Adam. Your dad pulled from the dust and I breathed into him. You are a product of that. Your destiny, that's the word there when he says in verse 7, it's desirous for you, but you should rule over it. It's much closer to the Hebrew word for it's desirous for you, but it's your destiny to rule over what lies outside the door. You were born to win, Cain. It's your destiny to defeat what's outside of you. And Cain's not what we'd call a religious man. He's not what we would, in our words, call a righteous man. And so God puts that opportunity and says it's from out there. I believe that what is happening in the Cain and Abel story from the outset is that God is offering intimacy and fellowship with His created beings, His sons, Cain and Abel. Civilization is being offered the opportunity to come into the inner chamber and enjoy the presence of God. You see, I used to meet with your dad. Let's speak. I'll be God, you'll be Cain for a second, all right? I used to speak with your dad every day. I would show up and speak to him in the cool of the day in the garden. That snake interfered. And your dad disobeyed. And that's sin. God's the first person to mention sin, by the way, in the Bible. Because He says to Cain, sin lies at the door. The opportunity to fail is there. You know, I love that intimacy I had with your dad. I'm inviting you and your brother into that. Come on in. And let's have that intimacy. Now, Abel offers a sacrifice. He's a shepherd, so he offers a lamb. And Cain's a farmer. And he brings that agrarian thought process to God, and he offers some form of crop. And what has happened is that, I want to get ahead of myself here because I want to back burner this for just a second, is that we've turned this into an issue of theology with Cain and Abel. Abel's theology was right, Cain's theology was wrong. That's us interpolating the way we think of God onto them, right? So let's don't do that. I want to back burner that for a second. That's really where we want to land tonight, is in cleaning up that theology. But I don't think it has a whole lot to do about theology. I think it's God is offering fellowship. Jesus is offering fellowship to Laodicea. Anybody open that door, me and you eat together. God's offering that same fellowship to Cain and that same fellowship to Abel. He opens his heart to the call. And no one can shut what God opens. And so the great door of opportunity lies in front of all of us to heed that call. And that leads me to the second thought. When Cain offers his crops, which we know he does because that's what we read in Genesis 4. His brother's offering is accepted and Cain's offering is rejected. And verse 5 says God did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? I want to deal with rejection for a second. I wanted to give you my 3 points because I didn't want you to get lost in this point thinking, gosh, God rejected Cain. If God's in the rejecting Cain business, maybe God's going to reject me. I wanted to go ahead and tell you that we're going to deal with that in point number 3 so you could relax, all right? So you don't have to freak out. You can just sit back and you can learn something in point number 2. Don't worry about the rejection of Cain, because whether you realize it or not, the reason we opened at Laodicea was to take care of point number 3. Okay? That was really, we laid that little foundation so that we could take care of that other one. So rejection's what happens to Cain. He offers his offering, God rejects it, and Cain is instantly angry. There's a bitterness that rises up inside of Cain. I want to talk about rejection for a second, because I would propose that in this room alone, if we weren't even being recorded, if no one else in the world ever heard or saw this sermon, and they will, but if they did not, we would probably have a half a dozen amazingly painful stories of rejection just in this room. And I'm being very conservative with my half dozen. We could probably come up with almost all of us have a story of rejection. Rejected in love, rejected in business, rejected physically, rejected socially, rejected psychologically. I don't need your details, you don't need mine. Everybody's had rejection. It stings. It can sting so bad that it consumes your entire world. You have a hard time even putting one foot in front of the other, simply being rejected. It didn't even have to be physical. They didn't even lay a finger on you. No one hurt your physical body, and yet hard to get out of bed. The pain of rejection. Well, when we say the pain of rejection, that's not metaphoric, guys. That's literal. Neuroscientists have actually studied rejection, put transmitters on the human skull to study rejection, and have found that the area of the brain that is activated when you are socially rejected is the exact same area of the brain that is activated when you are in physical pain. They've also found that you can use Tylenol, something as simple as a mild pain medication, to literally treat rejection in the same way you can treat physical pain. Now, I'm not a doctor or a pharmacist, so I'm not advising any of you to treat yourself with any medications. That is my disclaimer, okay? Not advising you at all to treat yourself with any medications. But my point being is it is an incredible thing that happens up here when we are rejected out here or in here. The brain doesn't know the difference. The feeling that happens in your body is as if you were literally wounded physically. The brain lights up like it goes to work to stop this feeling, and it can't because there's nothing to stop, which is why it can perpetuate and get worse and worse, because what happens is when rejection is untreated or unhealed is that rejection untreated works just like pain works in a wound that is untreated. So if you are stabbed, your body immediately begins to respond to the knife. And if you pull the knife out, it responds to the pulling of the knife out. And it doesn't stop responding because the knife's gone. In fact, a bunch of other stuff can kill you if you just act like nothing happened. So when the stabbing happens and the guy that stabs you walks away and the person next to you goes, well, the best thing you can do to get over it is just move on. And you go, okay, let's try that. I'm going to just move on. We're just going to go change shirts. That one was really bloody. And I'll move on and we'll see if that works. Is that going to work? No, you're probably not even going to make it to the closet to change shirts. I mean, if you did, that's pretty impressive. But if you can't reject, you can't ignore the rejection, the pain's too great. And it's not even the stab wound that does it. It could be infection and loss of blood and whatever, but it's real. Here's the incredible thing, and when I see things happening in humanity, I can't help this. I think it's living in the Genesis story for so long. When I see things happening in humanity, I trace a lot of stuff back to the garden now and go, hey, there's where we got that. Okay, that's where we picked that up. Because that's honestly what the creative narrative is supposed to do. It's not supposed to convince you of whether or not there were dinosaurs. It's supposed to convince you that your problems are real and here's a source of them. And if you can put it all around first Adam, then guess what? When the spotlight shows up on last Adam, you got yourself a solution. The Bible in a nutshell. And so you can trace things back into the Genesis narrative, and you can at least put your finger on some things that happen and the reason that they happen. One of the things that happens when we are rejected or when we're in pain, we're going to put those together as if they're the same thing because the pain of rejection, as we just told you, is real pain. So when that happens, we have a knee-jerk response. Boom. Automatic. Nothing you can do about it. If you ever go to the doctor and he checks your reflexes and you dangle your knees off the end of the bench and he takes that little hammer and he hits it and your leg shoots out and you kind of giggle. And you giggle because you didn't mean to kick, but you kicked. That's where we get the phrase, Knee-jerk reaction, what happens is that little nerve in there gets stimulated quickly and your leg jerks out. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's a little humorous to have that happen because you were out of control for a second. It's not a big deal. It's not as if the world stops turning, but it's interesting how you can't do anything about it. That's just a physical knee-jerk reaction. We also have emotional knee-jerk reactions. And what we do with them then starts to determine the course of our life.